Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Vice President JD Vance is coming to Camp Pendleton this weekend to attend a celebration of the Marine Corps' 250th birthday. And that has sparked reports of planned freeway closures near the base and some confusion as well. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer looks into what is really happening.
The Marine Corps says this Saturday's celebration will include a live fire demonstration of amphibious capabilities at Camp Pendleton's Red Beach. Rumors of road closures started yesterday after the media outlet Midas Touch claimed the White House will shut down portions of the I-5 for the event, and that Trump may launch missiles from warships into California this Friday and Saturday. Governor Newsom's office replied on social media platform X shortly after, saying this would be an absurd show of force and totally uncalled for during a government shutdown when members of the military cannot even get a paycheck. Newsom later posted again from his personal X account about the report. The Marines later released a statement yesterday evening to clarify the situation. They said no public highways or transportation routes will be closed. They also said all training events will occur on approved training ranges and comport with established safety protocols. This morning, following the Marine Corps press release, Newsom's office posted once again on X. They said we're relieved the White House backed off its plan to shut down a major interstate. Now that the I-5 will stay open, we hope the Trump administration applies the same common sense to reopening the federal government. In an emailed statement, Vice Presidential Press Secretary Taylor Van Kirk said, Governor Newsom is spreading fake news to Californians to fearmonger and score cheap political points. Vice President Vance is eager to be in California on Saturday to celebrate the Marine Corps' 250th birthday. KPBS reached out to the California Department of Transportation about the claimed I-5 closures. Caltrans Public Affairs Chief Chris Clark said, we were informed of potential plans and cautioned against it. We're glad they made the right decision, he said about the federal government. North County Transit District says they have also been following the situation. NCTD is monitoring the logistics surrounding the vice president's visit and is coordinating with relevant stakeholders. At this time, NCTD's services are not impacted, said the organization's Mary Dover in a statement. The Marines say the demonstration at Red Beach will be followed by a community celebration at Del Mar Beach. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
It's been a busy week for military news. More than 1 million service members were paid despite the government shutdown, and members of the Pentagon Press Corps turned in their credentials instead of agreeing to new rules set by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Now a political fight between the state and White House over an event at Camp Pendleton Saturday. KPBS military and veterans reporter Andrew Dyer joins me now. Thanks for being here, Andrew.
Thank you.
We just heard the latest on possible traffic problems around Camp Pendleton. So what is this weekend's event all about?
Well, Vice President JD Vance is visiting the base for a big live fire amphibious capabilities demonstration. It's the Marine Corps' 250th birthday. Next year, the U.S. celebrates the same. It's semi-quincentennial. The whole thing is being recorded by the White House for a broadcast next month.
So is this unusual for Camp Pendleton?
Well, yes and no. The Navy Marines do a lot of amphibious training at the base, and offshore it's standard for the Amphibious Ready Group and Expeditionary Unit deployment to operate there during workups. What's unusual is reports of some sort of ship-to-shore live fire event. The Navy manages its only ship-to-shore firing range on San Clemente Island, which is 70 miles off the coast and completely off limits to the public. In a statement, the Marines say they conducted a detailed risk assessment for Saturday. I'm told part of that was a discussion on whether the freeway should be closed, but we haven't been able to confirm reports of any plans to launch missiles over the 5.
Governor Newsom criticized the White House for going ahead with the event during the government shutdown, and there was a lot of concern about troops not getting paid this week. So what has changed?
Well, President Trump ordered the Pentagon to find a way to pay its troops, and it did. About $8 billion in unallocated DoD research funds were used to meet payroll. A similar shuffling at DHS allowed them to pay the Coast Guard.
Got it. So what about the next payday?
So far, there's no word on how they'll handle the end of the month military payroll. It should be noted that government civilians aren't being paid. It's just the troops.
And the other big story, Andrew, Pentagon reporters are refusing to agree to new press access rules, so they're no longer allowed in the Pentagon. What is that all about?
Right, so payday, the 15th, that was also the deadline the Pentagon gave its press corps to vacate the building if they didn't agree to new restrictions. The DoD wants news outlets to agree not to solicit what they call sensitive information from defense officials. But that's standard news gathering practice, and the rules have been criticized as violating the First Amendment.
So can you tell us what the reaction has been?
Well, near universal condemnation. The AP, Reuters, New York Times, Washington Post, NPR, defense trade outlets, every major broadcaster, almost everyone who reports out of the Pentagon refused to sign. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, former employer, Fox News, won't sign. Even staunchly pro-Trump outlet Newsmax won't sign.
Okay, so Andrew, did anyone actually agree to the new restrictions?
So far, I'm only aware of one, and that's San Diego-based One America News Network.
So what does this mean going forward?
It means less scrutiny over the military and its nearly $1 trillion budget. Journalism at its core is about holding the government, elected officials, and our military accountable to the people they're supposed to serve. So having access to those officials would be important for obvious reasons. But it's also not impossible to report on the military from outside the Pentagon's walls. I do it every day.
That's right, you do. I've been speaking to KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer. Thank you so much for the updates.
Thank you.
Tonight, pretty quiet conditions, clear skies, temperatures back down into the mid-50s in town. Now, keep in mind that we do have kind of that offshore wind component, which is making a difference for us across the region. And it's going to mean that the numbers are going to be a little bit different as we head into the weekend. I'll have the full forecast coming up.
A major earthquake could hit California. California is going to take a closer look at what it would take to bring a university to Chula Vista. KPBS South Bay reporter Corey Suzuki says that's been a decades-long dream for local officials.
On Monday, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill creating a new state task force that'll examine what it would take to build out a public university campus in Chula Vista. The task force will include representatives from UC San Diego, SDSU, and Southwestern College. It'll also include officials from the city and the Sweetwater Union High School District.
It's an acknowledgement that we have a college desert where opportunities are not being provided to families and students.
David Alvarez is a Democratic Assembly member from Chula Vista. He says he authored the bill because there's a lack of higher education access in the South Bay. Alvarez says the state will look for ways to fund construction and operation of the campus and consider legislative changes that might make it easier for the university systems to work together.
And that's what the task force is asked to do. Look at what are the types of programs that we know we need to offer in this region and what barriers exist in current state law that would require legislative fixes.
For decades, city leaders have dreamed about bringing a university to the South Bay. Chula Vista is one of the largest cities in the state without a public university. But instead of a more conventional college campus, officials like Alvarez imagine a regional hub for degree programs from multiple public universities across the county. The task force will start meeting next summer and will report back in 2027. In Chula Vista, Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
And as mentioned before that story, a major earthquake could hit California at any time, and knowing what to do when the ground starts to shake is important. KPBS education reporter Katie Anastas was at Horton Elementary School today for the annual Great Shakeout earthquake drill.
An earthquake has occurred. Expect aftershock.
The ground isn't shaking, but if it were, these fourth graders would know exactly what to do.
Lace your fingers behind your head, protect your neck, super quiet.
Schools and workplaces across the state participate in the Great Shakeout every year. It's a statewide earthquake drill, and fourth grader Genesis de la Cruz Lopez was ready.
I've been doing this since like kindergarten and first grade. They always told us to go under our desk quietly and do this position to cover our heads.
Drills can be scary, especially for younger students. Lopez says it's gotten better with practice.
I used to be scared a lot when I was little, but like I got used to it, so I started getting calmer and calmer during the years.
Her teacher, Winnie Gonzalez, was in class during April's 5.2 magnitude earthquake. She told her students to do what they'd practiced and take cover under their desks.
They were calm, and after a couple seconds some tears started coming, but they did exactly what they were supposed to do. So that shows you how practice is so important.
70% of Californians live within 20 miles of an active fault. That's according to Ahmed Albana. He's an earth sciences professor at the University of Southern California.
For the next 30 years, there's almost certainty to get an earthquake of larger than 6.7, right? Almost 99%. Every day that passes in California without this big earthquake happening is a gift and a blessing and an opportunity to prepare.
The current security situation has been resolved. Please resume normal activities.
After taking cover, Horton Elementary students evacuated to the blacktop. They made it from their classrooms to the blacktop in just 3 minutes. The principal says it's a new record. Lopez's assessment:
I did good, and so did my classmates, and I actually felt a little proud of myself.
proud that she and her classmates followed instructions and stayed safe. Katie Anastas, KPBS News.
There's a push these days to inject political discourse with a heavy dose of civility. Best-selling author and social commentator Roxane Gay calls that a pipe dream. She spoke recently to KPBS's Amita Sharma about why civility is unattainable in today's political environment.
Roxane, you write that civility, this idea that there is a perfect, polite way to communicate about sociopolitical differences, is a fantasy. Why is it a fantasy?
It's a fantasy because people are human, and when we are passionate about certain things, when we are committed to our beliefs, the idea that it's always going to be easy to talk about them and that it's always going to be a well-mannered exchange of ideas is really just that, a fantasy. It's this idea that we can disagree and there can be friction, but we don't have to get uncomfortable. And history has shown time and time again that there are certain socio-political disagreements that we simply cannot overcome with just debate. And it's really important to acknowledge that. It's really counterproductive to insist on civility. And, a lot of times when I talk about this, people tend to misinterpret and suggest that I'm advocating for violence. And instead, what I'm saying is that we don't get to put strictures on how these kinds of discourses take place, and we have to create space for uncomfortable conversations.
Well, I think the natural corollary to what you just said is that people probably say, well, look, if you don't have civility, then what are the prospects for bridging this divide?
I am not sure how we bridge those divides, because some of these divides are so fundamental when we're talking about issues of race and gender and the freedom to love who we want to love. How are we supposed to be civil when we're defending our lives and our very right to be? And so I hope that there are ways that we can have productive conversations about this, but anytime you have to slice away parts of yourself and compromise on your identity in order to create some sort of bridge between political differences, then you're not actually having a productive conversation. You're not actually creating change. What you're doing is capitulating. And we should not have to capitulate who we are just to satisfy people who are invested in bigotry.
You've already touched on this a little bit. there is talk of civil war in this country with a frequency and language I've never before heard in my lifetime. As you said, people think, well, if you don't have civility, then don't we run the risk of more political violence? Expand on that a little bit more.
Political violence has always been among us. Police shootings of unarmed civilians, that's political violence. So we can't pretend that it's a new phenomenon. But I do believe that we're seeing it with alarming frequency now. People are becoming a lot more comfortable making threats. I teach at Rutgers, and a professor there, a history professor, recently left the country with his family because a campus organization targeted his family and he was receiving death threats. And so, those same people call for civility while running people out of town for having different political ideas. And so we do need to be vigilant, and we have to do everything humanly possible to avoid political violence on any side because there's no justification for it ever. But the Civil War was one of the worst conflicts in American history. And while there's a lot of talk about it, I don't think we're anywhere near close to it. I think people lack the language and sometimes lack the critical capacity to talk about overwhelming discord, and they immediately go to war, which is something that, while painful to imagine, is tangible. We know what war is, we've seen it. And so I think that's why people reach for that. But I do not think we're there yet. And I hope I'm right.
Public Matters is a partnership with KPBS, iNews Source, and Voice of San Diego. You can see more of our stories at kpbs.org/Public Matters. The Senate failed again to advance a stopgap funding bill to end the government shutdown today. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says it's starting to slow the U.S. economy down. His department estimates the impact is about $15 billion a week. Many experts say even before the shutdown, tariffs were starting to put pressure on the economy. A new IMF report predicts they'll partly cause it to grow more slowly than the rest of the world in the coming months.
Tariffs tend to be significantly worse for the country that imposes them than the countries they're imposed upon.
We do have these, I hate to say it, boom and bust periods. And invariably, what goes up does come down at some point.
Senators are set to leave the Capitol with no votes planned tomorrow or the weekend. The House remains out of session. California is greenlighting a way to remove carbon dioxide from the air. The governor has signed a bill paving the way for carbon capture pipelines. KPBS environment reporter Tammy Murga says environmental groups are concerned about health risks.
California has an ambitious plan to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. The plan calls for using a process known as carbon capture and storage to meet the goal. The three-step process can reduce carbon dioxide emissions from companies that generate power or produce things like steel and cement.
You can capture carbon at these industrial sources like cement plants, power plants, refineries, other sources, and then move it by pipeline and inject it underground.
Up to a mile below the Earth's surface, rock layers trap it from leaking into the atmosphere. A state report says industrial emissions contribute more than 20% of the state's overall emissions. David Victor is a professor and director of UC San Diego's Deep Decarbonization Initiative. He says the technology is needed in addition to renewable energy. But Victor says
one of the barriers in the state has been building the CO2 pipelines. It's been technically illegal.
California banned carbon pipelines in 2022. The state was waiting for the federal government to create safety standards, but those efforts stalled under the Trump administration. Governor Gavin Newsom said the state will lead development of the technology when he signed a bill last week lifting the ban.
And this helps streamline that and put one agency in charge with very clear timetables.
That agency is the State Fire Marshal's Office. The legislation tasks it with creating safety rules for the pipelines. Victor says carbon capture and storage is relevant to San Diego because our power grid is part of California's power grid. Carbon capture and storage can help clean power plant pollution at the source.
What this does in principle is it helps open another option for generating electricity with low to nearly zero emissions.
But not everybody is convinced about investing in the technology. San Diego 350 is a group focused on mitigating the impacts of climate change. It opposed the state bill. Ryan O'Hara is a member of the organization's legislative team.
Concentrated CO2 is incredibly dangerous if breathed in. And there have been quite a few instances over the past decade of these pipelines rupturing and causing both damage and harm to the communities nearby.
At elevated concentrations, carbon dioxide can lead to oxygen deprivation and death. Now that pipelines can be built, O'Hara hopes the state won't let the fossil fuel industry influence its safety standards at the expense of communities. Tammy Murga, KPBS News.
If you've ever noticed your morning coffee costing you a little bit more these days, then you are not alone. In recent months, retail coffee prices in the United States have jumped, increasing by more than 20% in August compared to last year. Here's Michael Yoshida with more.
For many, coffee across the United States is getting more expensive.
We will have to do a price increase. There's no doubt about it.
Robert Peck, CEO and co-founder of Commonwealth Joe Coffee Roasters, says it's been a challenging year in the coffee industry, with costs rising and margins down.
Some people, we've already seen a shift. They're now buying beans and they're brewing coffee at home because that brings down their daily expense.
99% of all coffee consumed in the U.S. is imported, according to the National Coffee Association. And with many coffee bean growing countries slammed with tariffs by the Trump administration, including Brazil, the U.S.'s top supplier, which faces an import tax of 50%, big brands and small shops have been trying to absorb costs.
Because costs are high now. For the first time ever, we're thinking about, okay, well, maybe let's just not print the gold on the inside because that could save us another couple of cents a bag. We're trying to get creative without changing the quality of the product inside, which is what consumers care about the most.
But it's not just tariffs causing trouble. Shipping costs are also rising, while bad weather and droughts in places like Brazil and Vietnam are impacting harvests and production. And when supply goes down, prices go up.
We may have to think about switching, from Brazil to a Honduran coffee or a Colombian coffee or a Mexican coffee. At the end of the day, if you're not running a profitable business, you're not going to be in business for very long.
In Washington, Michael Yoshida.
It's been a different set of days here and hours as we've changed things up from the early week. Of course, lots of moisture moving through, and now we're getting a chance to dry out, warming up too, even as we head into the weekend with the offshore flow that's in place. But early next week, we will be talking about a cooler pattern working into our coastal and inland communities. That's where we'll see it at least the most notably. Tonight, we're back into the 50s again, 55 for the city, Oceanside 48 for you, Chula Vista coming down to 52, and Mount Laguna 38 for your low. As we venture our way across the area for tomorrow, that cool air mass is still kind of lingering around, but because we're by the coast and again, because we've had some of that offshore flow recently, our numbers are still going to be trending upward. For us, 75 in the city, lots of sunshine out there as we venture through tomorrow. You can see Escondido topping out at 81, El Cajon 83, and Borrego Springs making it to 85 for the afternoon. If you're on the coast, you'll find those numbers climbing through the 70s towards the weekend here, 78, 79 as we go through Saturday and Sunday. We do see the return of some clouds venturing back into the forecast. Then temperatures will cool off a little bit into the early week. Notice inland communities back into the 80s here. We will see them trail down into the mid 70s by the time we get into Tuesday. Overall, though, still pretty bright for most of us right through a good chunk of the weekend, and that includes in our mountain communities where temperatures are climbing through the 50s. We actually do stay a little bit warmer for our mountain communities into early next week, and it's going to be kind of a similar pattern here for our desert communities. Mid 80s, maybe upper 80s on Sunday, but trending through the mid 80s for much of the week, keeping things dry, bright, and fairly sunny as we do it. Just watch out for some of those gusty winds in the next couple of hours as we go through your Friday in some locations. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
After street closure permits were canceled last minute, the North Park Book Fair comes back this Saturday in pop-up form. KPBS arts reporter Julia Dixon-Evans says the switch rallied the creative community.
A beloved neighborhood book fair that was nearly called off gave a local cidery a chance to fulfill a vision, becoming a true third place.
I always told my friends, I wanted them to write a book here, or I hope somebody writes the next great screenplay.
Bivouac Ciderworks owner Lara Worm first heard that the North Park Book Fair was in jeopardy from her sister, an author. Instead of seeing thousands of book lovers left stranded due to construction and permit issues, she offered up the Bivouac Adventure Lodge space on 30th Street.
The whole key of the space is to be like a community center space. Of course, we're a cider bar and we have a coffee shop and we sell food and we, sell cider to go. My real focus was get people to slow down a little bit, get to know their neighbors, and have organic conversations with people that they might not hang out with in a different place or in a different time.
On its new date, the mini version of the fair, dubbed Taste of the Book Fair, is spread across 3 spots in North Park. Authors at Bivouac, artists and crafters at Verbatim Books, and zine makers and booksellers at the Bargain Center parking lot. Worm says North Park is a creative, collaborative neighborhood, and she sees her space in this book fair as a way to capture and celebrate that spirit.
I think you see it in a lot of other great cities in the world where there are third places or city centers or cafes or plazas where artists are going, where kids are going, where dogs are going. But we don't have that a ton in San Diego.
The book fair takes place Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Julia Dixon-Evans, KPBS News.
Julia Dixon-Evans also hosts the KPBS podcast, The Finest. It captures the people, art, and movement, redefining our region's cultural identity. And this week's episode features an interview and performance from local band Slacker. You can listen now at kpbs.org/thefinest, or you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.